Hello, Street Snappers. I know that lots of you will already be making photo books, but probably more of you want to, but haven't done it yet. Maybe you haven't got round to it. Maybe you're a bit terrified of making expensive mistakes. Maybe you've already tried it, but were not happy with the result. Then, of course, there are zines, but I think that's a big subject on its own, and we'll have a much deeper dive into the art and craft of zine making in detail in a future video. A photo book is a really good way to bring a project to life, or perhaps bring together a focused collection of work as a personal monograph, as your retrospective, or as your legacy even. We can easily produce books using the likes of online platforms such as Saal Digital or Kiwi or Bob Books or Blurb, and there are lots of others on the market. And these people generally do a pretty good job, even though it can be a little bit expensive if you're only having one or two books made. Alternatively, we could try and get our book brought to the market by a mainstream publisher. And while that's possible, it's fraught with hurdles and probably not for the faint-hearted. This is sometimes done via crowdfunding, like this great book, The Englishman and the Eel by Stuart Friedman, which I think was funded by Kickstarter and then brought to life by Dowie Lewis. But again, this whole idea of how to publish a book, I will deal with in a future video. It's a whole big subject on its own. But I see a lot of street photographers who self-publish using something like Blurb, whether it's one copy of the book or 10 or 100 copies. And when they've done this for the first time, I see people making the same mistakes over and over again. And I wanted to explore some of those common mistakes so that you can hopefully avoid making them. So the first common mistake I'm going to look at is where there's no clear intent, no theme, no sense of purpose. You might look at the book and think, what is this book? Why does it exist? I mean, this is sometimes born out of no clarity about who the audience is. Who am I making this book for? And this is an interesting point. If your book is made for other people, i.e. not just for you, do you know who they are? Do you know who will be interested in your book? And more crucially, who will actually buy it? Are they interested in your style of street photography? Or are they more interested in the specific subject matter, which could be a geographical area or a type of people? Are they young, old, beginners, advanced photographers, non-photographers? Where are they based? What do they like? What makes them tick? The more you have a handle on your likely audience, the more focused your book can be. Now, okay, sometimes none of this matters. Maybe you're just doing this for you. And that's a pretty good reason. So here's an example from Dick Brewer, who came on a workshop with me in Venice earlier this year. Very homemade. He used one of the online platforms, I suspect. What I like about this book is the colour of the page backgrounds, that he's exactly matched to the colour of the water in Venice. Brilliant. So, this is homemade bookmaking. This is great, and it's really good to see. But back to the point, I see so many books with no real sense of purpose. Maybe a random collection of images with no visual glue to hold them together as a body of work, no connective tissue. They could be very strong images in their own right, but their randomness dilutes their impact, and people will probably look at them fairly quickly, but not stop to really think about them. It's like listening to a Spotify playlist where you dip in and out of everything, rather than, say, listening to both sides of an LP, focusing on the tracks in the order that the musician intended. I think that's actually a pretty fair analogy. Okay, when you're well known and when somebody buys your book, they buy it just because it's you, perhaps. And if you're famous, you're more likely to get away with this. Or maybe you make a kind of greatest works compilation as you're reaching the end of your career. And then, yes, maybe that random collection of images works in that case. You know, perhaps as a retrospective, like this brilliant recent book from Daido Moriyama, and I think I mentioned this in an earlier video. There's no real consistent theme here, but as an anthology, it works just fine. But for most of us, let's stick to a consistent theme or project, and our book will be much stronger for it. So on to the second common mistake now. There's too much filler. So this is all about content, and there's a tendency to put pictures into a book which are, let's be kind here, less than ideal. I get it. You want a nice thick book with 120 pages, but you only have 38 suitable images. So what do? You include too many also-rans, the equivalent of your B-roll. Pictures that wouldn't otherwise make the cut. Too much filler and not enough killer. And this is a big mistake because the less good content dilutes the impact of great content. And you're left with something that's, well, all a bit average. But we've all done it, and we shouldn't. And if you're producing a quantity of books, this can be an expensive mistake. I know, I've been there. I personally think it's a mistake not to involve somebody else in the curation, the editing, the sequencing of your book. A second pair of eyes can make all the difference here, whether they're a photographer or not. Ideally, they would be. So take advice. Only include your best work. And if that means a smaller book than you would really like, or if you need to wait another year before publishing it and pressing that big green go button, then so be it. Trust me, the book will be better for it. So the third common mistake that many of us make is that we rush the process. People get so excited about publishing their book that they rush headlong into it and don't give the process enough time. And I completely get it. It's exciting. Why wouldn't you want to see your work in print quickly? But resist the temptation. Don't do it. Curb your enthusiasm. When you think you've finished your book, you probably haven't. You'll almost certainly want to change the pictures, change the order of the pictures, change the text, change the design, change the fonts, whatever. When I think I've finished my book, I'll probably leave it for 2, 3, 4 weeks or more. And during that time, the book will almost certainly improve. So wait. So on to the fourth mistake, and this is poor design. This is a really big one for me. Too few photographers pay enough attention to design, which is a bit ironic really, because we're meant to be creative people. We're producing a piece of art here, so it needs to be artistic, not thrown together using any old page layout software or any typeface, Times New Roman 12 point or Arial or Helvetica. It needs to look designed. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be a designer. You don't. But I guess you could always hire one if you wanted to. There's a very good website called Fiverr.com. I think it's FIVR. And you can hire a designer virtually by the hour. And, I've used these people for other stuff and they do a great job. So why not use them for book production or book design, book layout? I've known people pay a designer just for 1 hour to get this absolutely spot on. But yeah, I suspect that most of us have a good enough creative eye to be able to get it right on our own. Many of the self-publishing platforms like Blurb will give you some sort of template to design your book. And these are great up to a point. But you've got to remember that these templates are customizable. And it's always better to customize them. Don't just accept what they give you and expect it to work fine. You can do better. As I said earlier, we'll have a more detailed look at book and zine production in a future video. But the idea behind this one is just to get you on the right track and help you avoid some of the common gaffes. So here's one of my my own recent books, Observed, and this is a collection of my quirky observational street photography. So what you must do is avoid the need to cram your book tightly with images, and don't be afraid of white space. So with this book, I've thought through the typography, the content sizing, the sizing of the images, the consistent page layout, the typography, all this stuff. And I mentioned white space. As a general observation, just going off the point slightly, don't be afraid of using lots of white space to let your images breathe. It's quite jarring to look at a book which feels really cramped. It'll look much more stylish if you just give them some space. You can buy this book from my website now, by the way. I've only got a couple left, and I'll pop a link below. Right, here's another example, and I know I mentioned this in a recent video. This was someone's legacy, which she created just weeks before she died. And it has great design integrity. It just looks and feels a little bit special. So Zora has really thought about the colour scheme, the design, the layout, the typography, and the materials she's used. It's designed. So think about detail. Think about the typeface, the suite of typefaces available to you, the type size, the leading, the kerning, the spacing. Okay, all this stuff isn't as important as the pictures, I know, as the sizing of images on the page, of how much space. But it's really important. There is lots to think about, and it really does need thinking about. Another relevant point on this subject is that I see many photo books that are just a bit unimaginative. They look like everyone else's book. And I think when you're creating something like this, you have real scope to think outside the box and do something a bit different. So here's a good example. Take this one, Book of the Road by Daniel Meadows, published by Bluecoat Press. This is one of my favourite books at the moment. Okay, it's not self-published, but it's a great example of doing something a bit differently with its unusual shape and format, and quite a lot of text, which really brings the pictures to life. And here's another example by Paul Tracy. And I love Paul's books because they're all homemade. He uses scalpels and special archiving tape and a big cutting mat, and he prints them on his home printer, and he puts these books together. He even makes a little cardboard box to put them in. These are so bespoke and different and fantastic. We can all do this. It just takes a bit of creative thinking and obviously a bit of time. But how cool is this? So on to the next mistake now that many of us make, and this is getting the format wrong, or making mistakes on the format. So we have a lot of choices available to us here, starting with the shape of the book. Should it be portrait, landscape, or square? Plenty of people make the mistake of starting off with the wrong format. So if most of your images are in portrait orientation, then the decision, perhaps, not necessarily, is made for you. You would go for a portrait book, and vice versa. If you have a mixture of portrait and landscape images, then you could technically get away with either. It would need to be designed very well. But with a mixture, a square book, a square format like this one, works really well. So this is 210 by 210 millimeters, or A4 square. And I think this is really quite a nice format for a photo book. So it would usually be a mistake to produce, say, a landscape book which contains mostly portrait images. It would be a bit uncomfortable. So then you think about stuff like, will you have just one image per page, or will you put more than one image per page? I generally don't like more than one image unless they really need to be next to each other on the page. Will you have double page spreads? The spread looks great in a zine, but be careful of book when you don't have crucial content obscured by the fold in the middle. Like this one, which I was quite surprised to see in the Daniel Meadows book that I just showed you. It just looks a bit clumsy, and I'm not a fan of doing this. Then think not only about the visual qualities of the book, but the physical qualities. A big mistake is to skimp on the quality of materials to save a few quid. Don't. Someone sent me a book recently which had pages of about 70-gram thickness, and it felt dreadful. It was like reading toilet paper, and not even good toilet paper. Upgrading the stock to something like 170 gram or even more, it won't cost you a lot extra, and it would really improve the look and the feel of the book no end. Then think about the physical properties of the cover, hardback or softback. Do you have a dust jacket or no dust jacket? Will the cover be laminated? Will it be a matte lamination, soft touch? Will it be a glossy finish? Or maybe you'll go for a more premium look, like having a linen or fabric outer cover. What will it feel like? These tactile qualities are really important. Now, there's no right or wrong answer here. But again, the thing needs to be thought through and designed. Even if you can still get most of this into good shape, using a simple template-based approach like something on Blurb, you can do it. It's not that difficult, and it's a bit like designing a Squarespace website, which is dead simple. And I must say that Squarespace are not sponsoring this video, unusually. You get this basic template, then it's up to you to individualize it. And I mentioned this before, but I'm just emphasizing it again. Don't just accept the template. The more you can do with it, the better it will be. Okay, moving on to the next mistake, which is all about the sequencing or the order of the images in the book, which is even more important. You need to reel in your readers and grab their attention very early on. So I generally start with 2 or 3 or 4 of what you think are your stronger images. Then do the same in the middle part of the book, and then leave them on the high at the end with some of your better images. Take your reader's eyes on a journey, bring them up, take them down a little, bring them up, take them down, bring them up at the end. You've got this nice curve, this nice narrative arc. One tip to help with the sequencing is to make small prints, say postcard size. I mean, I use these little Instax prints. These are great. And print all the images for the book out, spread them out on a table or on the floor. Then over the course of a few days or even weeks, just shuffle them into the right order, play with them and get them right. That's a really good way to get your sequencing for the book right. Okay, so the next common mistake is to have a boring cover. You need to think long and hard about the cover for your book. According to a recent survey, 79% of people claim that a book's cover influenced their decision to buy it. So yes, most of us do judge a book by its cover. And it's something we need to pay attention to. So do we have a picture on the front or just text? If a picture, which typeface, what colour background, etc., etc. All these things are easy to get wrong, but just as easy to get right. So don't just slap a picture on the front, lay some text over it in a big, bold Helvetica typeface. Stop and think. Look at some of the great photo books you admire. What can you learn from their cover design? What looks stylish? What really appeals to you? Maybe look through the bookshelves in a good bookshop and just see which covers jump out at you. And while we're on the subject of cover, just going a bit conceptual for a minute, what about the title? This is always a big deal for me, and I put a great deal of thought into getting the title for a project right. My own personal preference is to go for something light and maybe quirky and humorous. And I see some books where the title reads like the header for an academic text. And frankly, for me, it's just a bit of a turn-off. So the next mistake is the text. Have you really thought about the text? What will you say in the book, if anything? You don't have to have text. But my personal view is that at least an introduction is a great way to lay some foundations for what's to come. Will you have page numbers, section headings, copyright information, legal disclaimers? Probably yes to many of those, but it all needs thinking through. And again, think not only about the words you use, but how they're designed. We've already talked about typefaces. And just remember, this is an art book. It's not a school project. Don't just take the easy options when it comes to stuff like typefaces. You know, I said before, think about the weight, the leading, the kerning, the hierarchy of headings if you have headings, and so on. So I think those are my main points. A final point that's worth remembering is that whatever method you choose for producing your book, I would order a soft proof or a hard proof so that you can see what the final result will look like in print. I've seen so many people miss this stage out, only to have 50 or 100 or 500 books delivered, which contain simple but glaring mistakes. I've done it. Check your colour calibration. Check things like brightness, colour temperature. Things that look one way on a screen could look very different on paper and on different kinds of paper. So do some kind of testing before you go for a print run. So a soft proof or a hard proof, I think, is money really well spent, and it could mean the difference between having a perfect product and something that's only fit for lining the dog kennel. So those are just a few pointers for you. I know it can be difficult and really time consuming to get all this right all of the time, but if you're going to the effort and the expense of producing any sort of a book or even a zine, I think you owe it to yourself to get it right. As I said, we'll take a closer look at the whole kind of production thing in a future video. But in the meantime, if you can avoid some of these common mistakes, at least you will be on a better heading. So that just wraps it up for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I will be with you again soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.